Right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning for our meeting on regulations for large-scale data centers. I think we will get started. So welcome. Again, thank you for being here. My name is Corinne Manning with Planning and Development Services. I'm the Director of the Department of Planning and Development Services. And we have a few staff online today who are going to be helping share information about large-scale data centers and hear from you. We have Ian Wan on our long-range planning team, Dan Bursick, our planning administrator, Carver Struve, principal planner, who is leading this effort, Nicholas Martel, our long-range planning section manager, Roxanne, planner with our zoning team, Cesar Acosta, the principal planner, as well as Aaron Coleman, our public information specialist. And we have Tawny Robertson and Colleen Whitaker with Southwest Decision Resources who are here to help facilitate the meeting and support a really productive conversation for everyone. We also have John Kameek, Director of Tucson Water, and Amanda Smith, lead planner on our long-range planning team. Apologies if I missed anyone else, but thank you all for being here to support the meeting today. So we appreciate all of you for taking time to join this meeting and engage on this really important community topic. Today's meeting is going to cover proposed regulations for large-scale data centers. This is a proposed change to our zoning code to provide more protections for our community and more regulations for an area that we don't currently have regulations. Our zoning code does not currently address large-scale data centers, and this is a growing land use as this land use is responding to rapidly evolving technology and has really come up in recent years in many communities. So our goal as a city is to make sure that our land use regulations are keeping pace with emerging land use and emerging needs in a way that protects our community and reflects our community's values and priorities. So that's really what we're here to do today, is to share what's being proposed for large-scale data centers in terms of regulations, explain those regulations in more detail, and most importantly, get your feedback on this proposal and hear from you. So tonight we're going to share a little bit of background in terms of how we got here and go through the regulations. Okay, so our mayor and council gave us direction in August of last year to develop guardrails for our community to basically establish a regulatory framework for large-scale data centers that protects Tucson and our resources. So that's really why we're here, is that we got direction from our mayor and council to develop these regulations in a way that protects our community. This came from a lot of community discussion around the Project Blue proposal. And that's when we realized that we didn't have standards and a review process for data centers. And we realized that that's a need we have in the community. So that's why we are acting now, is to make sure that we do have protections for our community in our zoning code. Because right now there is a lack of regulations, which creates uncertainty for neighborhoods, for policymakers, and potential applicants. So what we're doing today is we're not discussing any specific data center proposal. We are taking a proactive approach so that we have clear and enforceable guidelines for data centers. Clear standards will help protect neighborhoods, our natural resources, and provide more predictability and give us a process so that if a data center is proposed in the future, they are evaluated with specific guidelines and standards in mind. So since getting the mayor and council direction, we have we established a technical advisory committee. They helped inform the proposal that you will see tonight. We did research on data centers in other communities, how other communities are regulating them, what has been the impact of data centers in other communities. And we also have been working in parallel with the city's large quantity water users ordinance. That is a parallel regulation that we're going to discuss in a little more detail that is meant to work hand in hand with these proposed regulations for data centers. And again, tonight, we're not here to discuss any specific proposal. We're here to take a more proactive approach so that we have regulations in place for large-scale data centers. So zoning regulations are really just one piece of a larger picture of how large-scale data centers are developed and regulated. So there's a number of city regulations that would shape where and how a large-scale data center could be developed. That includes zoning and land use regulations, as well as economic development policies and the large quantity water user ordinance, just to name a few city policies. So our focus today is really zoning and land use regulations. That's what's within our purview at the moment. So zoning covers things like where a use can be located, what are the specific standards that use has to meet in terms of height, buffers, setbacks, things like that. Those are zoning standards. And that's what we'll be focused on. So again, there's a whole range of local regulations, not to even mention federal and state policies. So that could be things like state financial incentives, the ACC and their authority to regulate utilities. Those also are not really the focus of our discussion tonight. Those are very relevant and valid topics, but we're really here tonight to talk about, or today, to talk about what is within our purview and the focus of this current initiative, which is developing land use and zoning regulations to provide appropriate guardrails for development of data centers in Tucson. So we're going to go through that in more detail and have a lot of opportunity along the way to get your input and feedback. So thank you again for showing up and participating in this process. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to ask Tani to go over some of the ground rules for tonight.
Thanks, Corin. Hi, my name is Tani Robertson. Colleen Whitaker and I are with Southwest Decision Resources, an independent facilitation group based here in Tucson. So this is our third of 4 public meetings. And just to review quickly that, and many of you may have been in one of the 2 previous meetings, your feedback is, we need it to be collected in writing, detailed, as specific and precise as you want. We'll be sharing a link and a QR code to an online survey that you can be filling out through the course of the meeting and or after we finish. All of your written feedback, including Zoom chat, and you're welcome to use the chat as much as you want, will be made publicly available and shared with both the Planning Commission as well as Mayor and Council. Conversation and additional feedback with city staff is available during the breakout sessions. Each of the planning team that is very knowledgeable about this zoning code process will be in different breakout sessions. They are also committed to creating a frequently asked questions, FAQ, with answers to questions and made available again to everyone. And lastly, if you can all please respect everyone's time, offer constructive feedback, refrain from disruption. Next slide. So just to reiterate where and when for your feedback, plenary, meaning everybody together, Carver and the team will be giving a presentation about the different main components of the proposed zoning regulations. And then you can submit your comments and questions via the poll, which again will be shared through either a QR code, which you can use, say, with your phone to get into the survey, or click on the link and then you get into it via your computer. There's only one poll, one survey. So these different ways to get there are to the same place. And then after the plenary, we'll be breaking out into some breakout rooms again, and you are welcome to share your feedback and questions about this zoning code, as well as beyond zoning, other concerns, questions, interests you have about data centers. back to you, Carver.
All right. Thank you, Tawny. Thank you, Corin. As Corin mentioned, my name is Carver Struve. I am one of the planners who is supporting the development of this proposed code amendment. Before we get into what exactly we are proposing, I want to start with just some foundational information on what are data centers in terms of this discussion, or large-scale data centers specifically. So a data center would be a warehouse filled with thousands of computers working 24/7 to store, process, and deliver digital services. These house computer systems, networking equipment, and storage devices, which power the digital world, power this meeting, power AI, all of those products and services that we have become accustomed to using. Data centers have been around for a long time, but we are seeing that their size is increasing to these large scale, or sometimes referred to as hyperscale data centers, which are as such an emerging land use that we are looking to establish these guardrails for. In general, data centers all have some similar key components. These include things like server racks, networking equipment, storage systems, power infrastructure to drive all of these servers, and cooling systems to remove the large amounts of heat that are generated from that large number of computing systems operating 24/7. So when we look at really how to regulate this emerging land use, we really want to look at it as establishing guardrails for how data centers could be developed. This includes setting clear rules for their location and design, protecting sensitive areas around data centers, addressing impacts of data centers, such as their noise, scale, or other impacts early in the process, so that we have standards and regulations in place before we have a proposal that comes in. We're also looking at establishing processes that ensure public input in an open, transparent public process. And we'll talk more about where those points are in the proposed process as we get further into the presentation. And again, just to emphasize that the intent of looking at zoning regulations now is to be proactive and not reactive, to envision how we would like to see data centers and their impacts addressed through zoning. So as it stands now, we do have within the city's Unified Development Code where we treat data centers as a storage use. This was historically applied to smaller data centers, which we have a number of throughout the city. It made sense at the time before the large-scale data centers that they would be looked at as just sort of warehouses of data. However, as these have continued to evolve, the city's zoning administrator issued a written determination that large-scale data centers are what is called a utility generating system use, which is a separate land use class within the Unified Development Code. And as such, they could only be developed through a planned area development or a planned community development. The issue, though, is if they are developed through that, we don't currently have any standards to dictate how they might be developed. So as a result, it's largely up to specific applicants to lay out to the city how they would like to see a data center developed. With additional standards, which we're here to discuss today, Mayor and Council could provide guardrails for data centers that reflect the values of Tucson and address concerns that have come up not just within Tucson, but nationally with regard to their construction. So this next slide really lays out just in a visual way what our current standards are on top, which is that data centers are permitted as a planned area development or a planned community development as a utility generation use, largely up to an applicant to then dictate how they would like to develop it. We are looking at proposing standards that really address a litany of ideas and issues surrounding data centers, including defining what we're talking about, because you need to define something before you can regulate it from a legal standpoint, establishing where and how data centers might be located, establishing clear and transparent public review processes that require mayor and council review or approval, demonstrate access to adequate energy and water supply, disclosing energy use and energy mix, prohibiting the use of potable water for cooling, if not subject to the city's large water user ordinance, which we will be discussing a little bit more. Requiring additional setbacks from sensitive uses such as residential districts, requiring noise studies, establishing noise limitation, requiring sound walls and screening, cleaner high efficiency generators, prohibiting load shifting, which is where a data center would simply run generators instead of connecting to a grid, and requiring an enhanced landscaping and right-sized parking standards. So just a really quick overview of some of the concepts that we're putting forward as part of this proposed code change, and we'll get a little deeper into all of these. So, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about zoning and what it is and what it's not. So any city or jurisdiction in Arizona has the authority to set limits on land use through zoning. However, that authority is very specific and it's provided to local governments by the state. The state stipulates that the city of Tucson can regulate the use of a land, is it commercial, residential, industrial, etc., the building size, shape, height, materials, and purpose of the building, the dimensions of a site, setbacks on the site, how much of the site is covered by a building or other land use, and then also the location of the use and the land. However, we are limited by statute in what we can regulate with regard to water and energy use through zoning. It simply is not an authority through the mechanism of zoning that is given to the city to regulate. There are some things that we can do that we'll talk about, but to simply establish overall standards through zoning, we simply don't have the legal authority to do. Again, I just wanted to note also that for the purposes of zoning, it's important that we define what a data center is so that we can regulate it. And also to note that as our process is being proposed, there would be a review of any proposal and it would need to comply with the policies within Plan Tucson 2025, our recently voter ratified and adopted general plan. So in terms of zoning and a code amendment process, there is a process within the Unified Development Code that lays out exactly how a code amendment, such as something addressing large-scale data centers, would need to be reviewed and ultimately have action taken on it by mayor and council. And so this graphic demonstrates really the major steps in that process and shows where we are currently. So the first step in the process is that mayor and council asks city staff to actually begin work on a code update. And that occurred at the August 6, 2025 study session of mayor and council. So based on that, staff began researching data center regulations elsewhere within the state and convened a technical advisory committee of experts in various fields related to data centers, as well as environmental and electricity concerns, and came up with some suggested code amendment or suggested standards that could be included in a code amendment. And we'll talk a little bit more about the TAC in some further slides. Based on those proposed standards, which are in this presentation, we're conducting this series of 4 community meetings. This is our 3rd meeting. Our final meeting is tomorrow night in person at Rincon High School. So following those community meetings, we will continue to gather community feedback to inform the code language, make changes to the suggestions based on feedback received. And then we are looking at taking this item to the Planning Commission for a study session on March 18th. The purpose of a Planning Commission study session is for the members of the commission to review the proposal, become familiar with it, ask questions of staff, and provide feedback. Following that, we are tentatively looking at the Planning Commission scheduling a public hearing in April of 2026. At that point in time, the public is invited to come and speak on the proposed data center zoning proposal to the Planning Commission and provide their feedback specifically within a public hearing forum. Anyone is invited to speak at that. Following that, Tentatively, this item could be sent to mayor and council for their consideration and public hearing. And at that point in time, mayor and council could take action on any proposed code changes. So there are multiple steps in the process. These community meetings are one very important step to receive feedback, but there are also additional steps for public hearings for further feedback to be provided. As we're looking at developing these proposed regulations, we're also looking at existing plans and policies that are in place with the city and using those to help inform how we develop these regulations. These include, of course, Plan Tucson, as I mentioned, but we also have a number of other policies and plans, including Tucson Resilient Together, which is our climate action plan, the city's comprehensive economic development strategy, Tucson Water's One Water 2100 Master Plan, Tucson Water's Large Quantity Water User Ordinance, as well as the city's building codes and other provisions that already exist within the Unified Development Code that are applicable to any development within the city, including a large-scale data center that may include things such as rainwater harvesting or access provisions or any number of other things that would be applicable for the construction of a data center as it would be any other use that was met those same criteria. So the large quantity water users ordinance is something that was also adopted by mayor and council, and I'm going to turn this over to either Scott or Mike at this point if they're comfortable with speaking on the large quantity water users ordinance from the perspective of Tucson Water.
Hey, Carver, it's John Kmeek, Director of Tucson Water. I'm here. I'm able to make it today. Good afternoon, everybody, or late morning to you. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the other effort that has been undertaken at the city this year, and that is the large quantity water users ordinance that has been referred to earlier in this meeting. So the ordinance, we currently do have an ordinance in place. So that's something that's I just want to make sure is clear. That ordinance went into place in August of last year, and it was because of interest from some large water users that were interested in coming to Tucson. That's what we discovered with mayor and council that, we really don't have any guardrails for someone who wanted to come and set up any type of business. So it's not just specific to data centers, which this meeting and public meeting is about, but large quantity water users is actually open to any large quantity water user. So it could be not only a data center, it could be a food processor, it could be a manufacturing facility, anything that could potentially come to Tucson that is common in other communities around the United States that might require a large amount of water for their enterprise. So that's what ours is, kind of unbounded by that. So as any water user. So we quickly set up an ordinance adopted in August of 2025. It's very much guided by what City of Phoenix has set up, but there are some other things in that ordinance that we pulled from some other places around the country that we saw as well. But one of the interesting things about that ordinance is because we did set it up quickly, mayor and council has asked the department and the city staff to do a review of the ordinance that's currently in place and come up with any refinements that may be discovered that we might want to incorporate into our ordinance and more Tucsonify it, if you will. So that occurred over the last several months. We had an ad hoc community stakeholder meeting to review the ordinance that's currently in place, and that committee made a number of observations. Not all of it was a consensus of things that needed to be refined, but there was plenty of observations of where council may want to look and do refinements depending on how they want to manage large quantity water users that could come into the city over time. So this would apply to any business on that second bullet there, or any customer who wishes to come to the community that uses, on average, a monthly average of 10,000 CCF a month. So that's roughly 7.48 million gallons a month. So just for reference, our average customer uses about 8. So you're looking at it like a thousand house neighborhood or a large user that might occupy a similar type and have a similar type use. This would apply to new development with anticipated high use. One of the things when a new development comes to the city or comes to Tucson Water is they have to disclose how much water they intend to use. And that guides us for letting them know, do we have the right pipes in that area? Do they have to participate in upsizing the community water system? And then now a future question, if they are going to be a large user, is how will they address and offset their use of water that if it's anticipated to be over those thresholds. But this ordinance could also apply to existing users. So you might have an existing user that's an empty warehouse where their only water demand is a couple bathrooms and a kitchen. But maybe that warehouse through the zoning process ends up converting to some industrial use that would use a lot of water, and they have to request a meter upsizing for that. Then they would now fall into that large quantity water user ordinance. But the mechanism inside the ordinance, once someone discloses how much water they would like to use, is they have to demonstrate not only an application to be a large quantity water user, but it also has to come with a water conservation plan. How are they going to invest in the community water system, invest in the community water supply from a wet water standpoint as well, to offset as much of their water use as possible. And that's something that would obviously be negotiated with the Tucson Water team and our chief resiliency officer at the city. And if it has gotten to a place where it's a strong conservation plan, then it would go to mayor and council and the public to be able to weigh in on it as well. And so council will always have the ultimate last decision, and our council is the elected body that takes feedback from the community. So that would be the chance to weigh in with any additional thoughts or comments. And then council, if they adopt the large quantity water use, the water conservation plan for an applicant that falls under this ordinance, then they would be able to move forward. And there would then be guidance and guardrails in place to make sure that industry follows through with their commitments. So the most recent update on the large quantity water user ordinance is over the next several months, the council offices and the mayor's office will be reviewing many of the comments that were put forth by the ad hoc committee. And we're hoping later this summer to come back with any potential red line changes to the current ordinance in place to help refine it. And like I said, then help Tucsonify it to make sure that any future water user is respectful and intentional with the community's water supply and has a plan for offsetting as much water use as possible with that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Carver. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. So one of the other items that I mentioned previously in this process is the Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC. The TAC was established at the request of mayor and council. They requested that PDSD convene this advisory committee to share knowledge and expertise. Really, the TAC was formed to discuss key issues relating to large-scale data centers and all of the broader impacts related to the land use, environment, resource consumption, and infrastructure needs. The TAC members helped us to learn about this use, provide input on best practices, new technologies, and emerging technologies and approaches from other cities. This was also helpful for us to just understand where hyperscale data centers might be heading so that we can develop an ordinance that serves us well into the future. The TAC is advisory only, and they advise us on options for regulating large-scale data centers. They also made recommendations on topics and standards. However, the TAC was not a decision-making body. They simply provided input. The intent was to try to reach consensus, but not everyone on the TAC necessarily agreed with everything that was put forward. Additional information on the TAC, including their membership, is available online on the PDSD website. There is, however, on this slide, I'll talk a little bit more about how the TAC is composed. It includes 13 members from various groups, including a range from Watershed Management Group to Tucson Electric Power. We were really looking to bring all different aspects of opinions into the TAC so that we could have a very good technical discussion. These included things around environmental resources, power supply, energy equity, data center construction, and people familiar with data center operations as well. We also, for the TAC, had support from various city and county departments so that we had technical input from them as well, including our Office of Sustainability, our economic development experts, as well as some support from Pima County, including the Department of Environmental Quality, who could better advise us on things such as air quality regulations, which are the purview of that department. So the TAC was really thought of as a body that could just provide all of these different inputs into a draft proposal, which is then what we are discussing this afternoon. When we initially met with the TAC, one of the exercises that we conducted was to identify impacts of large-scale data centers and to get their feedback on what they believe collectively were the most important aspects related to their construction and regulation. I guess not surprisingly, this is what came back. Water and energy use were the top concerns. Air quality and noise impacts were also very high ranking in terms of concerns, which do relate also to their location and setback, as well as heat impacts. Wildlife amenities, especially when you're talking about large parcels, which is what these would entail, generator operations, and then there are also lower ranking concerns on glare, design and aesthetics, screening, vibration, and design features. These are not the specific categories that we ultimately ended up with as we continued through this process, but this was where we began with the TAC, just to really see where concerns were based on the larger group. So from here, we're going to shift into a discussion of some of the specific standards for the regulation of large-scale data centers through zoning. We are looking at these within really 5 significant subgroups. These include the definition of a large-scale data center, and we have some draft language we'll be asking for your feedback on, as well as review processes and location where they might be permitted as proposed. The next category is energy and water use and sourcing. We have a category for setbacks, so that would be how far the data center building is located from an exterior property line. A category on environmental compatibility, landscaping and parking, and then a category on noise and generator use. So as we get into this, we are going to be providing an opportunity for you to give feedback on each of these categories and your thoughts on what is being proposed. This can be provided for each topic by an online poll, and the link should be dropped in the chat, and we'll have a QR code on the next slide as well. Wonderful. So you'll be able to access that. This is one single poll document, but it has specific sections related to the sections that we are going to be covering in the presentation. So we ask that you stay with us as you're answering those questions, but also this is not something that you have to answer right away. If you want to sit on it and think about it, you can certainly do that as well. The link will remain open, but I just wanted to point out that that's how it will be structured, and that all feedback will be posted to the Planning and Development Services website and provided to the Planning Commission and Mayor and Council throughout the public process for the review of this proposed code amendment. Also, additional feedback and questions can be asked in the breakout session, not the lobby, following the meeting, so that will be available as well. So we're going to start with the poll. The first question is just to get you comfortable with using the poll. questions 1 and 2, which are completely optional, is name and email. If you would like to provide that information, please feel free to. If you prefer not to, simply we can move on to the next question. This is not a required response, but this is an opportunity to open up the poll and make sure that it is working correctly for you. I want to say also that the same poll document is posted to the PDSD website. And so if you would like to access it later or provide it to other people to access as well, it is available there. And again, we will have that remain open for the foreseeable future until we start getting into some future meetings. We don't quite have a date on closing yet, but it will be open throughout all of these meetings and into the Planning Commission. So that moves us into our first kind of technical aspect of the presentation, is a definition of a large-scale data centers. It's key to define them so you can regulate them. We are looking at proposing a size threshold of 50,000 square feet as a minimum square footage for something to be considered a large-scale data center in the city or within the Unified Development Code. And then we also include language on the general description of the equipment and use of the structure. So 50,000 square feet, just to visualize, is about the size of the Safeway at Broadway and Keno or Broadway and Campbell. So it would be about that size of a building. And here in the presentation, we have an image of a 50,000 square foot warehouse, just to kind of give an idea of what we are talking about in terms of that type of size. So our proposed definition is a large-scale data center is a facility, multiple facilities, or a portion of a facility on a contiguous site with the same controlling ownership interest and a gross floor area of greater than 50,000 square feet, housing network computer systems and or telecommunications equipment used for remote storage, processing, and distribution of data. I know that's kind of a bureaucratic sounding mouthful, but it was really developed for the purpose of being a regulatory document. And the intent of a lot of this language is to, particularly really related to multiple facilities or a portion of a facility, is to try to keep people from circumventing the regulations by just developing a string of little small data centers and saying, well, we're not really a large scale data center, so we don't need to be regulated. But under this definition, that would still qualify. So that is really the intent of that specific definition. And we will be asking for feedback on that through the survey. The next component that we have is proposed allowable zones. And so what we are proposing is to only allow data centers through a mayor and council special exception process, which is a very specific process that has multiple steps in a public process and ultimate consideration by mayor and council, only in the I-2 heavy industrial zone or through a planned area development or planned community development, which have very similar processes to the mayor and council special exception. We feel that I-2 is the appropriate zoning district, since that the intent of that zoning district is for heavier industrial uses that have impacts on surrounding land uses. And so the map on the screen shows the existing I-2 zoning districts within the city, primarily clustered around the south of the airport or even within the airport area, as well as some areas along I-10 and a little bit further north. So those are the current I-2 zones. And under this provision, they would be permitted provided they go through that mayor and council review process, either through a special exception, a PAD, or a planned community development. So it would only be through a discretionary process. Also, I think it's important just to note that this map really does demonstrate how isolated much of the I-2 is from the remainder of the city. Those are largely undeveloped areas. within the city. So next slide. Little bit more also about our review process is currently when a PAD, a PCD, or a mayor and council special exception is being considered, there is a public notice requirement that property owners within 400 feet of a site be notified by mail, and that all neighborhood associations within 1 mile of a site be notified, or excuse me, yes, all within 1 mile of a site be notified of the proposed change and the opportunity to provide feedback at a neighborhood meeting. A neighborhood meeting is a public meeting that the public can attend, not just the neighbors, to learn about the proposal and provide their own feedback. And so what we're proposing is to increase that 400-foot neighborhood notice requirement to half a mile around any proposed data center site, and expanding the neighborhood association notice from 1 mile to 2 miles. There's also a question about that within the survey to get your feedback on that proposal. So based on those changes, I really want to talk a little bit about the process that is proposed for a data center review, whether it's through this process called the Mayor and Council Special Exception, or if it's through a PAD or a PCD. It's very similar for each of those. This is the process, not to get confused with the last process diagram I showed you, which was for the adoption of the actual code amendment that would regulate data centers. This process is, if we get a proposal for a large-scale data center, this is what they would have to follow to be reviewed and considered. The first is this neighborhood meeting. That is a term that is within the code, but it is, again, a public meeting where the property owners and neighborhood associations, the surrounding property owners and neighborhood associations must be invited, but it's open to all. At the neighborhood meeting, the applicant is there to provide a presentation to neighbors, answer questions, document concerns. Based on that, they will make changes, oftentimes based on neighborhood feedback, and then submit an application to staff. City staff will also meet with them on a pre-application basis to provide feedback on what might need to be included in the proposal. And then the item gets moved to the city's zoning examiner. The zoning examiner is a quasi-judicial position within the city. So he's sort of like a zoning judge who is responsible for reviewing proposals, hearing a public hearing on the proposed, in this case, data center project, that might come up, and then providing a recommendation. And so there will be notice given of a zoning examiner public hearing. The public hearing will be held, public feedback will be considered, and the zoning examiner will make a recommendation to mayor and council. And then the ultimate decision on whether to approve, deny, or modify any proposal for a large-scale data center would go to mayor and council for their decision. It's really worth noting here that this process is the highest level of scrutiny that we have available for any development proposal within the city. It requires, again, multiple public steps that must take place in consideration prior to any approval or other modification or denial. So we're really want to make sure that the process that we include for this is not something where it would be a by right approval where somebody could just simply come in, apply for a building permit, and build a data center. Instead, there are multiple steps worked into this process to ensure that that public discourse occurs. And so from here, we will move on to a couple of questions. The polling questions, these are questions 3 through 5. These relate to the definition of a large-scale data center, as well as the proposed process and location for said data center. And just to make it a little easier, if people haven't already, I'm going to just flip back to the definition slide for just a moment, in case anybody wants to take a look at that while you're working on a response. And then I will briefly flip through the others in just a second. This is the zoning map in the proposal for either heavy industrial or a planned area development or a planned community development. And the enhanced notice requirements for the review process of going from 400 feet to property owners within a half a mile and neighborhood associations within 2 miles. And then our proposed review procedure for any data center project. So we'll just give you a moment to go through that. If people are comfortable, we can turn it over to Dan Bursick, who's going to talk about energy and water.
Great. Thank you, Carver, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Dan Bursick, I'm Planning Administrator for Planning and Development Services. So as mentioned earlier by both Carver and Corin, we are limited with what we can actually regulate via zoning for both power, energy, and water, which is why you'll see kind of some of the regulations. One with water, with as John had mentioned, we dealt with the large quantity water user ordinance. And then related to energy, really that's done at the state level and the federal level through the ACC or through FERC, et cetera. And so what we are proposing is something to basically give both the community, but also mayor and council and the zoning examiner and staff the ability to review review the energy use and potential energy use in order to make an educated decision for the review process that Carver just talked about. So we're in this initial proposal, we're looking at a requirement that would have the applicant demonstrate access to adequate energy supply at the time of that application. And so that becomes part of the public record. It's available for anyone to access as they submit that for their application. They must also disclose the proposed amount of energy and energy mix for that, including renewables in the application materials. This is something that we've seen in other communities that has been really helpful for that decision-making process. Because we have a discretionary process, this allows for mayor and council, zoning examiner, et cetera, to either, include that in their decision on whether to approve or deny something or add additional conditions as they move forward with that. So that's kind of the way that we get at least providing that information related to energy in this proposal. Next slide. Water use, kind of similar. Again, it's one of those things that's kind of outside of the scope somewhat of zoning, but it must comply with the city's large quantity water user ordinance, which is in place, but will also likely be amended a bit, revised a bit over the next couple months. And this requires, as John had mentioned, a water conservation plan, recycled water requirements and offsets related to that if possible, and then regular monitoring and compliance to where they have to make sure that they're meeting those numbers that they have in there and meeting that plan annually. The applicant for the zoning code, they have to demonstrate access to adequate water supply as well. And then similar to what we've seen in Marana, we're actually was reviewing a webinar from Lincoln Land Institute yesterday. They used this as an example of some regulations that are being applied countrywide in the country right now, prohibiting the use of potable water for data center cooling, if not subject to the large water user ordinance. And so, as we mentioned earlier, there is that 10,000 CFS. As far as it's the threshold that kind of kicks you into the large quantity water user ordinance. If you don't meet that, if you're underneath that, you would have to basically you wouldn't be able to utilize potable water for data center cooling for that. So it's kind of capturing that portion of it. Next slide. I think that's most of it. Okay, good. So yes, we have some additional questions. So feel free to keep that survey link open and provide feedback for that in that as we move forward related to both energy and water use. And I think we'll give you just a couple seconds to fill that out. And then we'll move on to, I think, setbacks. In the chat, I see those comment that says, "Was that supposed to cover electricity?" So that's essentially, and Carver, you can go back. It's really that energy disclosure requirement related to electricity. There are some other requirements related to backup energy and backup generators that we'll go over here in a second. But this is they have to show that they have adequate energy supply at the time of application. They have to disclose the amount of energy, the energy mix, which includes renewables, in those application materials that will help with that decision-making process for really mayor and council as they review these. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, related to proposed setbacks. So right now, there is a proposed setback requirement from residential areas. And the proposal that we have currently is a setback from data centers to urban residential zones and noise sensitive uses such as schools for that. So it's at 400 feet for setback. This is kind of what we've seen elsewhere being utilized, but we have gotten some feedback on this that it might be may not be large enough. So that's something that we're going to be looking at as we move forward for the proposal before we go to our planning commission in the future. And then require a 200-foot setback from data center use to commercial and office uses. So again, just kind of the scale of how this is. It really isn't appropriate necessarily in commercial office areas where you are trying to, build walkability. You're trying to actually have commerce and things of that sort related to that. And you do want to separate some of those kind of impacts that occur related to that. This picture on the right-hand side, I think, is from Mesa. A lot of the early kind of data centers that came in, especially in the Phoenix area, we saw a lot of them locating like right across the street from residential. And that's something that they've actually put restrictions in place to keep that from happening, which is, again, part of the reason why we're building in additional setbacks for these from residential, because of the potential for impact related to heat, noise, sound, etc. For those. Okay, next slide. I think that's it for setbacks. So again, same survey, and actually, Cesar, do you mind just putting that link back in the chat just in case? Thank you. Perfect. And some questions on setbacks there. I do see a question that says on the water side, was there a prohibition for non-potable use in the largest data centers? So they actually fall underneath the large quantity data large quantity data user ordinance, which really has a multitude of different requirements related to that. So it's honestly, it's even more restrictive in a lot of ways and requires offsets for that. So it would be one or the other depending on the size and the amount of water use that they utilize.
All right. Oh, sorry. Cool. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, almost afternoon. Still morning for a minute. But good morning, everyone. Thanks to everybody that's already presented. My name is Nick Martel, the Long Range Planning Section Manager here at Planning and Development Services. So one of the other things that we can look at when we're talking about making zoning regulations or proposing zoning regulations is related to regulation of noise. So Dan touched a little bit about setbacks and how far a use needs to be from like a residential zone. One of the other things we can look at is how far a building needs to be back because of noise. So one of our proposals here is to require an independent noise study that measures sound levels and tone. So there's already some city code that limits noise to not exceed 55 to 65 decibels in sound once you reach a property line. So depending on how far the building setback can also affect the noise levels. So we want to set clear noise limits at the property line to avoid any sort of conflicts at a property line with any sort of other use, whether it's residential or commercial. And then one of our other proposals is to require sound walls or roof screening around generators and other loud equipment. That can also help with screening visually, but it can also help with noise attenuation, making sure that that noise does not reach that property line. So requirement for independent noise studies, set some clear limits about decibel levels at property lines so that any other uses cannot be encroached on, and then requiring sound walls. So that's one of our proposals for noise. Next slide. Thank you. We also have some proposed regulations of generator use. Dan mentioned that a little bit earlier. One of our proposals is the requirement to use cleaner, high-efficiency generators such as Tier 4 or natural gas or dual fuel. The other is to have a battery backup used first during power disruptions. So before getting into generators, go with a battery backup. Another proposal is no load shifting, and load shifting is no running of generators instead of using grid power. So the generators would only be able to be used on emergency basis. So yeah, generators on emergency basis or when it's required maintenance. And then that non-emergency maintenance would be limited to weekdays, 9 to 5, general work days to avoid extra noise and extra property land use activities during those hours. So these are our proposed regulations for generator use. And then we will go to another survey here for you all to provide some feedback on that.
And we're working on getting a public version of the slides so you can reference those. There it is. It's in the slide. Thank you, Colleen.
And we'll give you all just a little bit of time to get in there. Okay, are we about ready to move on? Cool. One of the other things that we can propose with zoning standards is landscape and parking standards. So one of the things that we're proposing after conversations with the TAC and looking at some of our other standards in the city is to require an enhanced landscaping border of 20 feet. So that would be a landscaping border around the property line area to minimize some of the visual effects, to promote water harvesting, to promote native plants, and drought tolerant plant usage around a property. So visual aspects and also some responding to some concerns about nature, wildlife, and leaving some of the area untouched with pavement. Another thing we can define is a parking ratio. So we found that typically these data centers don't require a lot of parking. A lot of the work at data centers is maintenance, and then with a smaller staff. So we propose a smaller parking ratio. for data center needs. There's no need to put extra pavement in an area that's already being developed over here. So limiting the amount of impervious pavement by not requiring a lot of parking for these uses. Next slide. And then something else we've discussed is environmental compatibility. Sorry. So utilize existing standards in our current zoning code. So we are not proposing to make any changes to our existing ERZ or environmental resource zones. So if a data center happens to be within an area that already has some protected zones, all of those standards would have to be applied for that data center. Any watercourse, amenity, safety, and habitat areas would also be preceded by our current code. Commercial rainwater harvesting would be required for all sites, and that's maximizing rainwater on the site. And then hillside development standards would also still apply. So different areas in our city have different standards, and all of those would still need to apply. Some of those protections include protection of existing arroyos and washes, the use of low water or drought tolerant plants. I kind of touched on that a little bit with the landscape border. And then to harvest 50% of total landscape water demand. So rather than using municipal water, using rainwater and rainwater harvesting techniques to water those plants to limit water usage on site. And then, of course, utilize existing airport hazard districts and industrial use group standards for glare. A lot of these available I-2 areas are really close to that airport, so a lot of them would be subject to airport hazard district requirements, and also we don't want glare coming off of these, so limiting that through that ordinance. Okay, so another round of poll questions for landscaping, parking, and compatibility, environmental compatibility is up here on the screen for you all to take to. I do want to mention something that just popped up in the chat. So the 9 to 5 would be the general hours, and then on emergency basis as well for maintenance is the proposal.
Okay, I think we've probably had enough time to respond to those specific questions. At this point, we're going to begin to shift gears. We will talk in a minute about breakout sessions, but before we do, I just want to move forward to cover a couple of other opportunities for further input and discussion, and then I'll send it back to Tani to talk about the breakout sessions. We will have further opportunity following the presentation to provide direct feedback. Also, we have one more community meeting scheduled. That is tomorrow evening from 6 to 8 p.m. In person at Rincon/University High School. At that meeting, it will be similar materials or the same materials as were covered today, except for in person. We will also have a modified open house format where there will be posters with information on these proposed provisions within the lobby, and people can provide feedback and discuss with staff and ask questions there as well. The proposed standards are posted online on the PDSD website. as well as the written survey form if you want to continue to provide feedback. And there's also a information sheet on the proposed code amendment, as well as a frequently asked questions document that was recently posted and will be continued to be updated as we receive more questions. So the QR code there is to the PDSD website, should you want to access that, or you can simply Google City of Tucson Data Center zoning and it will come up. I just wanted to talk briefly again about the process and the next steps that we have in the process. We're currently at the community meeting phase. The next major item is the Planning Commission study session on March 18th, and that will be in hybrid format, both in person in mayor and council chambers and online. That is at 6 p.m. And at that meeting, Planning Commission will be able to ask questions of staff and provide feedback on the proposed code changes. From there, is anticipated that a Planning Commission public hearing will be scheduled for April, and then tentatively mayor and council consideration on the proposed code amendment in May. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tawny, who is going to talk a little bit about the next steps regarding feedback.
Great, thanks. So again, hopefully you've got it open, the survey, either through the QR code or the link. There's just one survey. We're going to move you into 4 breakout rooms, and the planning team will be divvied up in those rooms. So they'll be very knowledgeable about this code process, and you can ask your questions there. This will be the time for you to unmute yourselves and ask your question. We ask that you raise your hand. There is a react button on your menu at the bottom of your Zoom that would have a raise hand function. So you can do that. We ask that you speak, 30 to 60 seconds. We want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask a question or make a comment. Again, please be respectful of others' opinions. Allow everyone time to share. And additional written comments from the breakout session will be provided at the QR code or survey link. So again, you don't have to have all of your written comments recorded during this meeting. You can stay on afterwards in your survey, and you can continue to record comments and questions. I think we've gone over everything else. I think this presentation will be shared, other details that you'll need for post-meeting follow-up. So I'm going to open these rooms, and I'll go in there, and just another note that we will just allow the rooms. We're anticipating 20 minutes or so. You can decide in your rooms how long you're going to stay there. And if you end early, you can just leave the meeting. We've presented the final slides now so that each breakout conversation can operate independently. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. You can click join or accept as you go. And if you're having problems, let me know. Carmen and TL, are you able to get to a room?
Hey, hey, Tani, how do I get back into a room?
Hey, I can put you back.
Yeah, I don't
Where were
know.
you?
I don't, I was hoping to get in the water discussion
Well,
room.
you're not, there's not a water room specifically, but
No.
Scott is in room 2. So why don't I put you in room 8?
Okay, that'd be fine.
Okay, let's see here. Oh, not room 8. What am I saying? Room 4. You should be there. Do you see in your menu below, if you go to the 3 dots and you go to breakout rooms, and you could go to join room 4.
I don't see that. I'm trying to run from home today and I don't have a very good connection. And so what happens is I'm getting a bunch of blank screens
Okay.
when I try.
Um,
Let me
so if you
see.
click on Zoom so that you can zoom, all the Zoom apps are right there. Does that help?
Let's
Do
see.
you
I
see
just
the
have,
menu where you could mute yourself and that kind of thing?
let me see if I can get there. I don't get, I'm not, I can see the menu where it says audio and video. If that's it.
Okay. If you audio video, you don't see anything that says breakout rooms or more.
I see more
Go in more.
and then say breakout rooms.
Yeah, and then go to room 4. Join room 4. Do you see that option? Hi, Minwoo.
Yeah, let's see.
I'll put you in a room too. The breakout rooms just
So
started.
just go to room 4, join.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see how.
Aaron, do you need to get back to your room?
No, ours wrapped up pretty quick. We didn't have much discussion, so ours
Okay, thanks
ours
for
just
letting me
wrapped
know.
up. Yep, so I just hopped back here just in case you needed me to bounce to anything or whatnot. So
No, I think we're good. Unless, I mean, you're welcome to join another room if you want. Otherwise, we're good.
no,
They're just
so
talking with Anita.
what's that?
It looks like there's one participant in that room.
No, in with Carver.
Yeah.
No, even she's not talking to Carver.
Oh, okay. Maybe she's just accidentally still there.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think she's just hanging in there. We had two questions from one individual that were just brief questions, and then we wrapped things up and sat in silence for a while. So I hopped back over here, but
Okay.
I think things
Yeah.
are winding down, so I'll just hang out in here until things wrap up.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think this way is actually better because then each room can just end when it needs to.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. As you were.
Carver was staying in there just in case Fee or whoever was still in there needed stuff, but
He can come back out now.
yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Bye. So if there's some final questions that you were in the middle of, we can do another 5 or so minutes. Some of the groups had already closed.
Yeah, Mark, I think you were in the middle of something.
Thanks, Dan. I was just going to ask, when we do rezonings or specific plans, the pads, is there also going to be sort of the utilities providing review saying, yes, the data center does have, will have access to that much power. So it's not just the data center saying, here's the amount of power we're going to use. It'll also be the utility, either the water, the energy utility saying, yes, that power will be available.
Yeah, they're gonna have to show that, and they'll be working with the utility in order to provide that disclosure on there, because yeah, especially with TEP, I mean, they're gonna have to show where that's coming from.
Jason.
Thanks. Yeah, just one other thing. I was at an power industry conference up in Phoenix about a month ago. And one of the things that I learned up there is that the power quality issues inside of these hyperscale data centers are they're on a scale like, the industry has never seen before. They're talking about, 100 megawatt, load swings per nanosecond. So all this to say is that I think whatever, the city wants to do in terms of zoning, they need to take probably a deeper dive into how those emergency and backup generator systems and all the other elements of the basically uninterruptible power supply are going to actually work in practice. Just as recommendation.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jason. That's that is very true, and that was part of our conversation I think we had in our TAC, but also something that we should probably reach out to some of the other kind of maybe municipalities to see how it's worked up in the Phoenix area.
Yeah, just somebody who's got one of these things and have been operating for a couple of years. I would go, interrogate them on just how their on-site, the hyperscale data centers on-site uninterruptible backup systems are truly working in practice.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I like it.
All right. Did that finish the last questions you all were in the middle of? Carver, do you want to just wrap us up?
Certainly. I just want to pop over to this slide. Thank all of you for coming, for participating in this process, and for taking time out of your day to be part of this meeting. And those of you who have also attended other meetings, we really appreciate that. Again, to just note that there is one more meeting in person tomorrow evening at Rincon/University High School, and that we will be looking at going to the Planning Commission at 6 p.m. on March 18th for a study session. So thank you all, and stay tuned to the website for more information.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. So long.